Okay, Scott, when you're ready, let's kick it off.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Rogowski. This webinar and live Q&A is brought to you by Northern California Small Business Development Centers, SBDC. And this is Ask SBDC, town hall meeting. It's our 18th session. Today is May 15th, so happy Friday to everyone. And this is brought to you Northern California SBDC and the Finance Center, which we'll learn a little bit more about. So we are all in this together. All right, so introduction really quick. Northern California SBDC, we cover the most northern 38 counties of the state. We go from the Oregon border down the coast to Santa Cruz. We cover all 9 counties of the Bay Area. We go southeast to Stockton, then back up through the Nevada border and then the Oregon border. And we're here for you, for small businesses in that region. So we're supported by SBA, Small Business Administration, and that is our federal funding. And then we're also funded in the state of California by the Governor's Office of Economic Development, which is called GoBiz. Because of our funding, we come to you as small business owners at no cost. We offer no cost one-on-one advising, 100% confidential. And we also offer workshops and webinars and educational events such as this today at no cost as well. And we have SBA on the phone today. We have Noah Brode from the San Francisco office. So he's going to give us an update a little bit later in the presentation. So the Finance Center, we have a team of lending experts. So before COVID, as a region, SBDCs, we were here for business entrepreneurs that want to start their business, want to grow their business, hire jobs, and also get access to capital. During COVID, we've kind of had to move all of our staff into our consultants into understanding the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and then whatever other loans are available to you as a small business owner if you want to stay in business, reinvent yourself, or grow. My name is Scott Rogowski. I'm the director of the Finance Center for Northern California SBDC. And then we also have Sunita Maharaj. She's the associate director for the Finance Center. And she is going to be answering questions. Her and I are both going to be answering questions in the queue. And then we are going to open it live for questions at the end of everything. So a quick agenda today. So we have a disclaimer. We have a guest speaker. We have HR human resource expert and Norcal SBDC regional advisor, Chana Anderson. She actually was brought to this webinar last Friday. So by popular demand, we brought her back. So she's gonna talk today about lots of great things regarding HR and potentially get into maybe PUA or unemployment, how to bring people back, how to stay at home, all that great stuff. Really cool. So then we're gonna talk about, so we're gonna kind of switch it up a little bit here. I'm actually gonna go through my presentation that I normally go through. For those of you that have been on webinars with us, I'm just gonna go over some updates real quick. We're gonna do an SBA update from Noah Brode, and then we're going to get to Chana because sometimes we have a lot of questions around loans, sometimes we have a lot of questions around HR, so we're just kind of gonna go through this a little bit. So so this is our guest speaker today. This is Chana Anderson. These are some of the things that she's going to talk about today after I speak, and we'll go through that. So our disclaimer today, as always, is that things are changing all the time. We would appreciate your patience with us, with SBA, with the lenders. This information was correct when we presented it, but we kind of just put it together. So hopefully it's all correct today. Noah might tell us some things that have been updated, but we're not sure yet. So if you haven't applied for EIDL, when it reopens, we ask you, please don't hesitate to apply. And when PPP, Paycheck Protection, is actually currently open right now as we speak, we ask you to please don't hesitate to apply. The faster you apply, the faster you'll find out if you get money or not. If you have a lot of investors or partners within your organization, please check with them before you take out this funding. They may or may not want you to take advantage of these funds. So we don't have access to check on the status of your application. We ask that you just be patient with us and SBA. With that said, if you applied before March 29th and you have a loan application number 2, then you have availability to start reapplying right now. If you applied after March 29th and you haven't heard back, you are going to hear back. SBA is going to get to everyone in the queue, assign you a case manager, and then start talking about your loan. Also, if you're looking for a triple P and you applied at a bank and they haven't gotten back to you, you really need to press hard because the money will run out, but you need to press hard on if you have a SBA loan number assigned to you or not. All right. So the PPP, which is Paycheck Protection Program, it's a 1% loan. It's a 2-year loan. You don't have to pay a payment until 6 months. There's a universal form that you can find at the Treasury's website, or you can email us. If you're a sole proprietor, you need to gather all your 2019 1099s. You need to have your 2019 Schedule C done. If you do not, they will take your 2018. All other entities, you need to gather all your W-2s, all your 940s, 941s, your quarterly reports. You need to have that together. This is the minimal amount of paperwork that you are going to need. You're going to need whatever else the bank, the lender is going to ask for from you. It may be your taxes, your driver's license, your bank statement, stuff like that, which we can help you do. If you email us, we can help you gather all that. All right, so the 8 weeks start the day you get funded. The 8 weeks start the day you get funded. So if you get funded today on the 15th, you have 8 weeks, which will go into July, which is past June 30th, which is fine as we know it today. But the 8 weeks start the day you get funded. If you got funded a month ago and you weren't sure how to spend the money, you need to start spending it as soon as you can be so that you have the best chance of it being 100% forgivable. So what's forgivable today, unless Noah has other stuff that he's going to tell us, today we just know that it's 75 to 100% on all payroll costs, which is employee benefits, employee compensation, 401k, healthcare, all that stuff that you pay within your payroll costs. If you spend 75 to 100% on that of payroll, then it could be 100% forgiven. If you want to break it up and spend 25% or less on rent, utilities, and interest debt payments, and then 75% or more on payroll costs, then it could be all 100% forgiven, potentially. We are still waiting on legislation for that. But here's some PPP forgiveness information. This came from SBA. It talks a little bit about after the 8-week period with how the loan disbursement works. It says the borrower must supply documentation to support the request, which is everything that the lender is going to ask for. Talks about payroll costs, must account for at least 75%. And then other considerations within here. I'm not going to sit here and read this to you, but because we did put this on our website, and this is being live streamed so that you have access to this PowerPoint. And I'm sure that there's some questions that we'll get to. So for Schedule C and Schedule K, so for those of you that have a Schedule C, you are a sole proprietor or a self-employed individual, or you receive a 1099, it's all the same entity. Schedule C, if you look at line 31, that'll tell you your net profit or loss. And if you take that and you divide it by 12 and then multiply it by 2.5, that's 2.5 months worth of payroll costs, then that's your loan amount that you can qualify for or apply for. Forgiveness, you would take line 31 divided by 52 weeks and then times by 8 weeks, because it's the first 8 weeks of when you get the money to spend. So that tells you how much of the forgivability of your loan amount could potentially take advantage of as a Schedule C. If you're a Schedule K, those of you who are Schedule Ks or have a Schedule K, you know more than we do about that. You could have that with a 1065 that you schedule with your LLC, or it could be on your 1040 tax return, you have a Schedule K. So you take loan amount, you take the box 14 and do these calculations similar to the Schedule C. And box 14, if you have enough money in there, great, then you can qualify for triple P. If you do not, like it's negative or it's zero, then it's going to be very challenging for you to qualify for triple P. All right, so we will help you find triple P lenders. This is a chore for some of you, not all. Some of you probably received PPP money from your big bank or your medium-sized bank. If you're having trouble, you can go to sba.gov/paycheckprotection/fine, type in your zip code, and you could find some big banks, little banks around your area so that you could reach out to. If you're not sure where to apply, we have some non-customer lending institutions. We have a nonprofit lender here called Lendistry that will lend up to $2 million. Then we also have non-customer medium-sized banks, Gateway Bank in Oakland, and then also Pacific Enterprise Bank out of the Bay Area. They are both offering triple P loans up to $2 million for non-customers. If you have questions, you can email us at loans@asksbdc.com. If those weren't enough options for you, here's a great list that was put together by SBA. It's 16 lender platforms. A couple of these are direct lenders like Opportunity Fund out of San Francisco. They will lend to you as a non-customer up to $150,000. They are also known as a micro lender, so they will do a triple P for you under $25,000 or under $10,000, which is great because sometimes you just need a little bit of money, and that loan amount is hard to find with other traditional larger lenders. But we've heard great things about Blue Vine Capital, where if you apply with them, they're kind of like a broker platform. They have access to all these lenders across the country that are doing triple P loans. We have heard the fastest response from Blue Vine. Like if you apply today, you may find out today, but more than likely you're probably going to find out Monday. But that's it. Like it's very, very quick. If you need help working through that, we have some great financial center advisors that have used Blue Vine, and they know how to work the process. All right, so this is going to bring up a lot of questions, I know, and it may be a little confusing, this slide, but it's mostly because I didn't get into the nitty-gritty and the super details, but in a high-level overview. For those of you that have heard that your EIDL loan gets rolled up into your triple P loan, and then it all becomes a 2-year loan, well, that is not true. Whoever said that to you either made a mistake or just had some miscommunication. Your EIDL loan does not get rolled up into your triple P loan. They are 2 separate loans. You can have both loans. You just can't use them for the same purpose. You can't use triple P for payroll and also use EIDL for payroll. But if you're wondering where they do merge and kind of blend together, it has to do with the EIDL advance. So the EIDL advance is that essentially forgivable part of the EIDL that you get up front. It's $1,000 per employee. So if you're a sole proprietor, you qualify for $1,000. If you have 10 or more, you qualify for $10,000. So that is essentially free money that you get. It's not a grant. It's forgivable money from SBA that will just dramatically just pop up into your account one day, because when you apply, you give your routing number and account number, it just goes in. They don't call you. They don't notify you. They don't text you. They don't email you, nothing. Just wake up and voila, there's your advance. So if you get an EIDL advance and you get a triple P, for this example here, you take the triple P loan amount, let's say it's 50 grand, you take the EIDL advance, that's 10,000, so you got 10,000. The total forgivability of the triple P would take the 50,000 minus the 10,000, and your total forgivable amount with triple P is 40,000. And unfortunately, this is all we know today. There's legislation that's hopefully going to come out next week that may tell us something a little bit different or a little bit more detailed. All right.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Noah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's good for people to prepare for that. There might be some nuance where, you know, in some cases where it's not backed out, but yeah, I think people should prepare for this scenario, and if they don't have to back it out, all the better.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks, Noah. All right, so EIDL information. So we went over the triple P. There's more information regarding the triple P right now as we speak, because there's money available, there's lenders available, and the EIDL right now is, unless Noah says something different, the EIDL right now is only open for, he gave me the special nod. So unfortunately, EIDL is only open for agricultural businesses. And if you applied before March 29th and have a loan number with a 2 in front of it instead of a 3, you get to apply right now on EIDL portal. But eventually the EIDL is going to open up to every business, and hopefully we'll find out next week sometime. So EIDL stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loans. It's a 30-year loan. and it's 3.75%. And there's no talk about that rate going down. If you're a for-profit, it's 3.75. If you're a nonprofit, it's 2.75. And you don't have to make a payment until the first of the 12th month. So 11 months deferred. It does earn interest during that 11 months, but you do not have to make a payment until the first of the 12th month. We have some forms here that they may ask for you. If you have questions on how to fill it out, you can email us and we can help you, but they may not even ask for these forms. All right. So if you do not qualify or you have been declined, if you are ineligible based on one of these five things here, if you are ineligible or have been declined for a triple P and an EIDL, you may qualify for a California State Disaster Loan Guarantee Program. If you are a smaller business, you can qualify up to $50,000 as a microloan. And you can go to ibank.ca.gov, ask some questions there, or look at some information. If you are a larger business and you need more capital than 50 grand, and you want to qualify for up to $1 million, you have to, these monies are, so there's SBA, which is federal, and they are guaranteeing the triple P loans. Then there's state guarantee loans as well, very similar to SBA, but on the state side, and that's through financial development corporations. In our region, we have two. We have one in Oakland called Norcal FDC. If you want to reach out to Chris Horton, his email's here and he can help you with that. If you, and there's another one in Sacramento. So if you're YOLO North in Sacramento called California Capital, and the Finance Center, myself and Sunita, we work closely with the team at California Capital. Debbie Miramoto is the CEO, and her team does an excellent job working through these requests to find out how to get you money if you are unable to qualify for PPP or an EIDL. Just go ahead and email us at loans@SBDC and we'll get you connected. Chris Horton, if you're in the Bay Area. And the biggest thing here is if you're a 501c6, you qualify, you're disqualified for triple P and EIDL, but you qualify for state loan guarantee. So please email us and we'll get you connected. Look at this. Okay, so this was yesterday, but it's every Thursday until possibly for the rest of the year. Norcal SBDC and our team has joined forces with a company called CaseForce. They're essentially an attorney platform where they answer questions that we can't answer around EDD, PUA, other stuff around labor and the payroll part of it. Since we're pretty much loans all day long, we joined forces with them, and now we are on their webinars. It's cool. It's 100% pro bono, office hours, direct access to attorneys. Pretty awesome. All right, so we'll go through a quick SBA update. We have our San Francisco district office being represented here by Noah Broad. This is the information, not to get a hold of Noah, but to get a hold of if you're applying for an EIDL loan, the email, the phone number. So Noah, I want to give you like a couple minutes, see what.
Yep. No big updates from Tuesday. We're still waiting for guidance from the Treasury Department on forgiveness provisions. Yeah, it's not necessarily an update, but just kind of a thing for people to have in mind. But this week there was additional legislation that was introduced into Congress for maybe another stimulus bill or another stimulus package, and there will be a lot of articles, and there'll be a lot of commentary, and there'll be a lot of discussion about what is in that bill. Until it is signed into law, our office won't be able to comment on it or really say anything about anything that may be in that. So that's just kind of for folks that may be reading headlines about other stimulus programs or changes to programs or anything to that effect. None of it really becomes real until the negotiation is over around what goes into those bills, and the bills are signed into law, and then they're implemented. So even if something passed today, which I believe is unlikely, even something to do, past today, it would be another week or more, or 2 weeks even, before there would be rules or implementation. So just putting a little pin in that. And then, yeah, I don't think we have other major updates. We're just still waiting for that forgiveness provision. That's the most burning item at the moment that we're waiting for feedback on. And I don't want to take up too much time from Chana.
All right. Hey, thank you very much, Noah Broad, for being on the call. I appreciate it. Appreciate your consistency with helping us out on these calls. So Noah is going to stay on till noon. I'm going to be here till noon. Sunita's going to be here till noon. Shauna's going to be here till noon. Ellen may have to jump out, but we are at our guest speaker moment. And also, so there's 82 questions in the queue. Our goal is to get to all or most of those before noon. Shauna's going to talk probably about 30 minutes or so, and then we're going to kind of tag team the Q&A from HR issues to loan issues. And then, yeah, so I will let Chana Anderson present. So thank you for joining us, Chana.
Thanks, Scott. I'm happy to be here. And while you were chatting and sharing, I actually went into the Q&A and began to answer some questions. We had some that came in initially really early on. So just wanted to put that out there, and Scott and I will continue to do that throughout the rest of this webinar. And I will need to share screen. So let me pull up the presentation here. Great. Looks like everybody can see that, right? Can I get a thumbs up real quick? Perfect. All right. So thank you all for joining us today. As Scott mentioned, my name is Chana Anderson, and I've been in the world of HR and employment law for, gosh, we're just going to say around 20 some odd years. I stopped leaving off years after 20. My job today is to share with you the information I know around HR as it relates to COVID-19. And that's really in an effort to help you resume your businesses and keep you profitable. So Scott already talked about the disclaimer. You know that already. Let's chat a little bit about the world as we know it now. So clearly everything has changed in the world. You know, we're 8 weeks, almost 9 weeks in since COVID-19 started, and there have been numerous regulations nationwide, including states and local ordinances. We have unemployment in double digits, as well as many people working remote, almost 25 to 30% more than before COVID-19. You and I are eating takeout regularly. I've become a prominent expert in how to use DoorDash. People are Netflixing and Zooming. So there's so much happening and things are moving really, really quickly. And an example of moving that quickly is the governor came out on May 6th with a brand new executive order. You may or may not have heard this, but Governor Newsom shared that there's a presumption about workers' compensation related to COVID-19. And as you see on the screen, if there's an employee that tests positive for COVID-19 and they have worked in your place of business in the prior 14 days, there's a presumption that that employee obtained or was exposed to COVID-19 by the workplace. So what that means is the employee could actually file for workers' compensation, and that claim would actually need to be processed. There's still so much about this we don't know. As you can see, this order just came out. What we're seeing is there's a big chasm between something that's a legislation or an executive order and then regulation. Very similar to what Scott and Noah are sharing with you. Because of that gap, it takes a little bit of time to figure out what exactly this means when it's an implementation. So stay tuned, there'll be more information on that. I know it's surprising, but as soon as we have more info, we'll be able to share it with you. Here's kind of what my goal is to share with today. I want to talk a little bit about sources of truth. I'm sure you have questions about pandemic unemployment assistance, or PUA as I refer to it. Also last week on May 7th, Thursday, May 7th, the governor issued state guidance for reopening. So many businesses have not had a chance to see that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, as well as what do you do to bring your people back to work? What are some of those plans you need to have in place? How do you mitigate? What are the things you need to consider? We'll of course cover health and safety, talk a little about that new work environment. And if you're bringing employees back, we surely need to cover the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. It's a big mouthful, a lot of words in there, but all really important things for us to talk about. Sources of truth. If you've heard me speak before, you know I always talk about this, and it always bears repeating. When you're thinking about your business or sharing information with your employees, it's so important to really identify where you're getting your information from. In this internet age, it's super easy to pull up information from a number of sources. But when we're thinking about wanting to be consistent, applicable, reduce your liability, and something that's credible, you want those particular bodies that we know are doing the research. So my information that I'm sharing with you today, this is where I get my data. These are also the regulatory bodies or the agencies that will hold businesses accountable for following the rules. As you see on the slide, we've got everything from OSHA to the IRS, several state of California departments, EEOC, and there's also 2 law firms on here. And the reason I call out law firms is these 2 happen to be Littler and Morgan Lewis. There are others out there like Ogletree Deakins. I am a fan of large national law firms because they do a great job of taking some of these laws that you and I learn and condensing them down into bite-sized pieces where we can understand them. And they traditionally link their articles back to the law. So in case you wanted to look that law up, you could do just that. And again, as you're thinking about sharing information with your employees, find out what your sources of truth are so that you can easily go back to your employees and say, this is where I got this data from. You too can look at this. And these particular entities have also done a really good job of making the information accessible to the general public. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about the pandemic unemployment insurance. Many of you think about this related to the CARES Act. This is the additional $600 that many people are eligible to receive. And the key thing about this one is the fact that it's been expanded to include business owners, people that are self-employed, independent contract workers, as long as they are no longer working related to COVID-19. It's the same traditional process that you and I would follow if we were employees in terms of application. It's all through the online site. You put in information about your income, and then EDD actually goes and they verify that. There are 3 different ways that payments are happening. And you'll notice on the right-hand side of the slide, there's the initial phase with a minimal amount of money. And then the second phase starts. And that's the one that most people are the most interested in, which is that $600. So people can potentially be eligible for the minimal amount plus the additional $600. And that $600 lasts through about the end of July. After the end of July, then we're back to that minimal amount again. And the key thing that's important to know is in order for people to be eligible for that $600, they need to meet the annual income threshold of about $17,368. There's a question that continually comes up about PUA and whether or not people can continue to be eligible. And as you'll see, this is actually a quote from the Department of Labor around whether or not someone can be eligible for it if they choose not to work. And in this case, the employer is open, right? The business is open, but the employee is not sick, no one in the household is sick, they don't have children to care for, and they're not caring for themselves. And those lines are really important because they actually come out of the eligibility for some of the other protected leaves. So if the employee is able to work, meaning the business is open, but they're not taking care of themselves or a family member, and they're just simply concerned about coming into work, unfortunately, they are not going to be eligible for unemployment. That's not for you and I as an employer to make any changes about. There's nothing we need to do. That is something that may come out later when EDD actually does an audit about unemployment benefits. But it's been clearly stated that in that instance, the employee is not eligible for unemployment. Let's fast forward and talk a little bit about reopening, in particular reopening your businesses. I mentioned earlier that last Thursday on the 7th, the state of California expanded their reopening page. So if you go to their COVID-19 page, there's actually a whole section on reopening businesses in California and the 4-staged process. So currently we are in stage 2. In stage 2 are all of those lower risk workplaces. Well, because all those businesses are reopening, they've provided guidance, specific guidance on what businesses need to do and what their plan needs to be in place to do what we call mitigation control. How do they reduce the potential exposure in the workplace? So of course, we've got a quote on here from the state of California. And what you're seeing is every business needs to take a look at the environment. What's the potential risk? What are the job duties that employees are engaged in? Where might they be exposed to coronavirus? And then develop a super simple, specific plan. It doesn't have to be some 10-page or 8-page or a 20-page document. It's a simple plan around what you're going to do to protect your employees, train your employees around limiting the spread, how they screen themselves, right? Perform an employee self-screening for symptoms, and then what to do if they have symptoms. Most of you have probably already begun to think about implementing control measures, how you disinfect, and even more so, how you maintain physical distancing. So just to reiterate, the state is looking for every employer who's opening their business to have a site-specific protection plan. So begin to think about your type of business and what you can do to create this plan. So most of you are probably thinking, well, this is great. Now I've got this requirement. What do I do? And kudos to the state of California because they have actually given industry guidance. The last time I looked, which was just 2 days ago, there were about 13 different types of guidance depending on your industry. So what you see on the page now, or what you see on the slide, is workplace guidance and retail guidance. There is guidance for hotel, there's guidance for restaurants, there's guidance for delivery, there's several different categories. And not to worry, if you can't read that fine print down there around what the website is, we actually have created an employer resource page. And Alan is typically super fast. He may have already uploaded it into the chat and will likely do so several times throughout the webinar. So all of these links I'm talking about today, all of these websites are in that resources page. So be sure to take a look at that. So again, back to this slide, what you see on the left side, these are actually screenshots and drop downs from the state of California, just giving you an example of the type of guidance. And what you'll notice is they're actually offering a full book, a packet on what to do, and then a checklist. And what you see on the right is the checklist for retailers. That's just page 1 of 3 that helps you understand the level of specificity and the things you need to consider in your plan. And I wouldn't be surprised if within the next couple of days, there isn't a sample plan that's out that you can actually use to create this. So when you're thinking about reopening your business, there is that practical side of what you need to do to comply with the law. That's reviewing that guidance from authorities, whether it be your shelter in place, your local authorities, potentially it's the state or your county authorities. And then it's also conducting that work risk assessment. I chatted a little bit about what that looks like around the physical layout, the job duties your employees perform, but a big piece of that is also understanding the concerns of your staff. You know, what might they want to say? Think about what kind of concerns for health they might have, transportation, childcare, how are they actually going to get to work? All of those things really matter. And if you haven't thought those through, our intention of bringing people back to work might not happen because employees aren't in a place to actually be able to come back to work. Let's chat a little bit more about this. When you're thinking about employee exposure, OSHA has given us 3 unique categories. There's low risk workers, medium risk, and high risk. Many people are going to be in that low risk category, which is they don't interact with the public very often. They don't necessarily engage with their coworkers. You know, someone like me who works remotely, really low risk. And then we move into that medium risk. Those are people you and I are seeing all the time. You know, the folks from Amazon, the people in the grocery stores, janitorial, transit, and then again, the high risk. And again, when you're thinking about your staff and the locations they might be in and what their exposure might be, OSHA has actually given us great guidance on that. So this is also another resource that's on the page, as well as there's a site source on the slides, and the slides will be shared as well. So I really encourage you to take a look at the OSHA guidelines to help you determine what your employee's level of exposure is. And it'll also provide you with direction on what you need to do. So you don't necessarily need to make these things up. There's some great resources already out there for you. When you're thinking about that new work environment, the first thing starts with physical layout. Consider the last time you went to the grocery store or you went to the pharmacy. Maybe you went and picked up a prescription. You likely noticed there was signage on the walls, there was tape on the floors, what we call kind of directional guidance, visual cues on how people move throughout a space. And depending on your business, you will want to do the same thing. Even if you are not customer facing, you will still want to consider how your employees move through this space. And as humans, we actually need those visual cues. There are a great number of posters that you can actually download from OSHA as well as CDC. Those two are on the resource page, some links to those posters. But that's the first place to start, is your physical distancing plan. How will you keep people 6 feet apart? That actually might involve moving furniture. It might involve creating barriers, perhaps some plexiglass barriers that hang down, all those new elements. The other thing about the physical layout of the workspace is considering occupancy. So if you move furniture, that's great. Or if you create a single pathway in and out of a building, that will work as well. But it also may mean that you can't have the exact same number of employees in that space that you had previously. So perhaps your workspace had 10 or 20 people in it before, maybe you had 30. And potentially with this physical distancing, that will need to be greatly reduced down to 10 or 15. So really take the time in advance of bringing your employees back to work or reopening your business to consider all of these things. And the more people you can engage in your plan, the more thought partners, the more robust and the more thought out it'll be. Exposure control. Simply put, how do you reduce that risk? How do you ensure that your employees, vendors, clients, customers are potentially not impacted or exposed to COVID-19 in your space? And that's really going to be about routine cleaning and disinfecting. There is a great list provided by the EPA, also on the resource page, that talks about which disinfectants actually kill coronavirus. And one of the most notable things on this list is how long you need to leave that agent or that cleaning product on the surface before. Most of us, you spray it on your counter, 20 seconds later, 10 seconds later, you wipe it right away. Well, what we've learned is if you spray something on the counter and you wipe it, you have not necessarily given that cleaning product the time it needs to actually kill the virus. So some of these cleaning products take anywhere from 20 seconds, 30 seconds, up to 10 minutes, depending on what it is. And this EPA list is a great place to start to understand what cleaning products are out there, who manufactures them, how to utilize them, and what we're calling the cleaning time, so how long it needs to actually be on there. Be sure that you're actually posting information, reminding your employees about how to physically wash hands. I know by now we think most of us have it down about the 20-second rule, but we do need those reminders and cues. And then think about personal protective equipment. And for some of us, we hear those terms and we think of people that might be in high hazard industries. But for the everyday worker, this could be gloves, this could be a mask. And is that needed in your workplace? When we're thinking about masks, the CDC and the OSHA has said quite clearly that employees do not need to wear N95 masks. As a matter of fact, those are things we need to leave for healthcare workers. The CDC has gone on to state and provide guidelines around using cloth masks or facial coverings. You'll really want to look again at the work that your employee does, where they are related to their job duties and their risk category in order to determine what type of mask is needed for them. If they're in a basic job like myself, where I'm in an office most of the time and sitting in front of a computer, a cloth mask is fine. And perhaps I'm outside, I'm working with chemicals, maybe I'm doing something in landscaping, I might need a different type of mask. It really depends on the type of role, but for most of us, a cloth mask will suffice. So think about, again, what type of equipment your person might need. The other thing that's top of mind for many of us, and we're hearing quite a bit of conversation around, is employee health screenings. How do I screen my employees? What do I do? What's effective? For the most part, the Center for Disease Control and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration are advocating on self-checking, right? Where you and I each day go through a checklist before I go to work around my symptomology. Do I have a fever? Do I have chills? Do I have muscle aches? Do I have a new loss of taste or smell? So having employees perform a self-check around their symptoms, and then notifying the supervisor or someone that's designated in the workplace if they have symptoms. From that point, then the supervisor can tell them what they need to do. And most specifically, they'll likely be stay at home. So stay at home until your symptoms pass. If your symptoms increase, please connect with your medical provider. And there actually is great guidance from the Center for Disease Control on when to discontinue home isolation. So if your employee is symptomatic and they are self-quarantining, there's great guidance out there that says, here's when they can return to work. And that too is on the resource page. The other thing to really be aware of is perhaps your employee comes to work. And once they're at work, they begin to show signs and symptoms of being sick. What do you do? Right? And really what we need to consider is where can we isolate that employee when they're in the workplace, if they show up and they actually have signs and symptoms. And when you do isolate them, then it's about making sure that we're having respiratory etiquette, which could be a mask, it could be covering coughs and sneezes, and then send them home. But these are all the things that you want to think about in your plan so that when you reopen your business, if something happens, you don't suddenly have to think about it. You want to make sure you capture all these components. And then at least the last part of this is how might you communicate if one of your employees is exposed or diagnosed with coronavirus? There is an expectation that employers will identify anyone that this employee has worked with in the last 14 days and advise them that they potentially have been exposed and need to self-monitor for symptomology. Again, all the components you want to think about in a control plan, and that's about mitigating the risk. This is just reinforcing that both the EEOC and the CDC have shared that you can send employees home that have COVID-like symptoms. There's no reason you need to keep them in the workplace. It's very clear that they may pose a risk and potentially expose other employees. They've also opined that you can take an employee's temperature. I really encourage employers to think about what's the best self-screening, or excuse me, what's the best screening method for your business. If you're thinking about taking employees' temperatures, then you'll really need to consider setting up a private, confidential space for employee information like that when you're actually going to do a screening. How will you record it? Where will you keep it? What happens with that information? How will you protect it? There's a lot to doing health screenings in the workplace or actually taking an employee's temperature. So think very long and hard about the best process for your work environment and how you will be able to maintain confidentiality and privacy for employees. Well, let's assume that you've gone through the first 7, right? You've developed your plan. You know, that next piece is really about educating and training your employees about the safety in the workplace. It's one thing to craft a plan, but if we're not sharing it with staff, it absolutely does us no good. And we really need to make sure that they have an understanding of their responsibilities and what they need to do. And we truly can't make an assumption that all of our employees understand what's going on and what their responsibility is. The other thing to understand is, oops, I'm sorry about that, what trauma it is for employees, and the fact that employees experience all of these things related to COVID-19 that bring about stressors and anxiety. These transitions have been really huge for employees. What programs or practices or what flexibility can you demonstrate to help your employees transition back into the workplace and reduce the type of trauma, anxiety that they might be experiencing? What we're seeing from some employers is they're actually creating a test group. Instead of returning all employees at once, they are doing a pilot group of employees, a very small percentage, to actually come in and work for a period of time. That period of time could be 4 days, 5 days, a week, 2 weeks, 30 days, depending on your type of business. And that pilot group is actually testing those new protocols and procedures. They are testing the new physical layout in the workspace. They're testing the new cleaning regimen that they're part of. They're testing how they actually come into the workplace and are there bottlenecks of where employees come together. So consider all the different things that you can do to engage your employees in the process. And the more you do that, the more you share, the more transparent, it's an opportunity to reduce the anxiety that comes with transitioning back into the workplace. And last but not least, I'm a big proponent of communicating frequently. Even when you don't have your plan fully baked and fully developed, it's important to communicate with employees all along the way. When you're thinking about the plan, asking them for their input, sharing with them what you're considering. These are the people that actually do this work, so their input is very valuable. You may even want to consider doing a small survey of your employees before you craft your workplace plan. It's a great opportunity to learn what their concerns and what their thoughts are, what challenges you might run into when it's time to reopen your business. Maybe you'll get ready to reopen and they don't want to come back. And it'd be helpful if you knew that before, so you can begin to plan or even shift your plan in terms of getting them to come into the workplace. So the more you communicate, the better. Let's turn a little bit to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. And the connection to everything else we've talked about before is the fact that if you bring employees back into the workplace, your business may need to comply with this act. This particular act came about in March and became effective April 1st. And it really focuses on providing emergency paid sick leave and emergency expanded family medical leave for employees of businesses of 499 employees or less. There's a way to get reimbursed for this through tax credits, and there's an exemption. And while I'm sure many people want me to talk about the exemption first, let me at least tell you about this particular law, and I promise to cover the exemption as well. So here's the scoop. If you have a business that has fewer than 500 employees, then emergency paid sick leave is available to your employees if they meet one of these criteria. You know, one, maybe they're subject to a local quarantine order like many of us are, but they're unable to work because of that order. They're advised by a healthcare provider that they need to self-quarantine. Maybe they're experiencing symptoms and seeking a medical diagnosis. Or perhaps it's not for their care, it's for the care of the individual and their family. That individual has a healthcare provider that's told them to quarantine, or maybe they need to care for a child under the age of 18 due to the closure of school or childcare. So if an employee meets one of those criteria, they can be eligible for paid sick leave. So if I'm eligible for paid sick leave, what do I get? I get 80 hours of paid sick leave. I get 80 hours of time off, right, to care for my health or meet one of those other criteria that was on the prior slide. And really important to know, this is in addition to any other current company sick leave policy. If you are already providing paid sick leave under California law, this sick leave is in addition to. The two of them can be combined, but you definitely need to make sure you're providing the federal one first. And as you can see from the slide, there are caps, right? So if it's for my own care, then in essence, I can be paid up to $511 per day. And that's only if that's my regular pay. So let's make sure we're clear about the fact that it's my regular pay up to a daily cap for a maximum of $5,110. The pay rate is different the cap is different if the care is for a family member. So if the cap is for a family member, or the care is for a family member, it's $200 per day up to that cap. There are some considerations in terms of how you calculate what a regular rate of pay is, and I really encourage you to take a look at the instructions on the Department of Labor's what we call FCRA or the FFCRA website. They've got some great FAQs that is also on the resource page, and I've actually called out on that resource page where to look, what question number to look at in order to calculate how much someone will be paid. That's the emergency paid sick leave. Let's talk a little bit about the emergency paid family medical leave. Again, still applicable to employers with 499 employees or fewer. The employee needs to have worked for at least 30 days. And this is unique. The employee is unable to work or care or telework, right? Because they're caring for a child under age 18. And that care has to be related to COVID-19. If those three things are in place, then the employers have to provide up to 12 weeks of job protected leave, and 10 of those weeks are paid for. So 10 of those weeks are paid for, and you'll notice the pay rate is different, right? So we're still paying the regular rate of pay up to 2/3, right? So 2/3 of my regular rate of pay, and still with that maximum or cap of $200 per day, a total of $12,000 in total. So if you're doing the math, you're probably thinking, well, wait, if the first 10 days are unpaid, how could it potentially be 12,000? Well, maybe those first 10 days, the employee can use their emergency paid sick leave if they have not already taken it. So that's how we get the $12,000 in total. There's a helicopter flying over my house. I'm hoping you all cannot hear that right now.
We can.
You can. Yeah, it's great, right? Every day about this time, they like to fly over. If it's too loud, let me know. I will shut the window.
Look, we can still hear you clearly, Chana.
Perfect. Thank you, Alan. Okay. If you're providing this paid family leave or this emergency sick leave, there is a way to recoup for that. As part of this act, the government has allowed employers to receive tax credits dollar for dollar, right? So for every dollar you pay, you can actually claim a credit. And that credit can be either in your quarterly tax filings. If you want to do it sooner, it could be every time you process your payroll, or some employers even want to take advantage of this and have the money in advance. And there's an opportunity and a way to do that, which is through the IRS Form 7200. In all candor, I've yet to see an employer take advantage of the credit advance in terms of Form 7200. Most are doing it on their payroll, each particular payroll time, whether it's 26 payrolls where they're doing it semi-monthly or every other week. It's really about what's going to work best for your business. If you're going to do this, I strongly encourage you to work with whoever your payroll provider is. Most of those payroll systems have already set up a way to capture the different types of leaves and to track it. And that tracking is going to be really important when you apply for those credits. And if you're ever audited later on down the road, 3 years later, 2 years later, you already have that information. So again, be sure to work with your payroll provider. Now on to the exemption, which is what all of you most want to know, is how do I potentially not have to do this? First and foremost, you have to be a small business with less than 50 employees. Again, that leave the employee is requesting has to be related to the childcare and the closure of the provider. And then an authorized officer of the business, so perhaps it is the CEO, maybe it's the sole proprietor, maybe it's one of the business partners, has to take a look at the business and decide if one of those 3 criteria on the bottom of this slide is applicable to them. And that really is going to be unique to each business. So one of those criteria could be if we provided this, it would cause the business to cease operating minimally. Or maybe it puts the financial health in great jeopardy when we talk about this business. Or even there won't be enough qualified employees to perform the service. And if that's the case, it would need to be something very unique. And sometimes I give the example, I actually have a client that's in a mortuary business and was looking at having to provide this. And there are very few people that have the skills around mortuary services. So if they had provided this particular service, or excuse me, this particular leave, then they wouldn't have anybody else to perform that unique skill. Same thing with breweries. If a client owns a brewery and there's only one brewmaster, the one person that does this, nobody else knows how to do it, potentially there is not enough workers to perform this distinct service. So again, you as the business owner need to take a look at this exemption. Where do you potentially qualify for this? And once you make that determination, please document it. Write it down. Make sure you capture your thinking on this. You don't have to send it in to someone. However, if you are ever challenged in terms of how you arrived at this determination, why you think your business is exempt, you really want to be able to pull out that documentation, particularly as this challenge may not come until 7 months, 8 months, 12 months later. And while memories are good, many of us cannot remember back 12 months ago and how we came up with the decision. So please, please make sure you hold on to that. Okay, so we are almost at the Q&A piece, and I always like to start with my own common question. And one of the common questions that I get is, what happens if an employee won't return to work because of a lack of childcare, health concerns, or higher income from unemployment? And we've really already addressed one of those in terms of the health concerns. The other thing that you're probably seeing quite a bit is people are making more money from unemployment than they might in their regular job. And that is really causing employees and folks to rethink, maybe I don't want to come back to work. I'm making really good money right now. Here's my perception on that. Traditionally, EDD does an audit. If you're an employer, you are accustomed to either filling out a form online or in person. that speaks to whether or not you've reoffered that employee work, how much you've paid that employee. So EDD traditionally does those audits. And I understand right now, because of the day and age we're in and the system, that they are overwhelmed and those audits might not be happening. But throughout my career in HR, those audits always happen. They may happen at the 6-month mark, the 7-month mark, the 10-month mark. Whenever they happen, that information will come out regarding whether or not you offered this employee work and if they refused it. If that is the case, and the employee refuses work, they may find that they not only were ineligible retroactively for unemployment, but they may have to pay the money back. And paying the money back could be done through garnishments, either through the state or through the federal government. So you as an employer, I encourage you to document if you offered an employee a job to return to work and they refuse. I always like to do that via email. Offer it in email, have them reply in an email. If you want to do something more formal in an offer letter, you can. And then just hold on to that information. It's not our job to necessarily to report to unemployment. There isn't necessarily a system for that because they're so overwhelmed right now. But we just want to document the fact that we did offer that to the employee and they refused. The other common question I get is around how to spend PPP money. And I know there's a ton of these in the chat about what you can do. And Scott and Sunita may also speak to this a little bit later on in the Q&A. But some of the ideas you can consider in terms of how you spend that PPP money in a really short period of time is you can use that money as paid time off. Perhaps your employee isn't eligible for unemployment, or perhaps they want to do partial unemployment. You can use that money as paid time off as a retention tool to encourage them to come back when you are fully reopened. You can use it to offset healthcare costs. I've even seen that you can use it to offset retirement contribution costs. Maybe it's an opportunity for your employees to develop some skills, perhaps around Excel or any other technology that you've wanted them to engage in, leadership development, even new projects or initiatives. If there's been a project that's been on your list for quite some time that you haven't had an opportunity to get to, but now that your employees are at home, maybe they can do this for you. They can do some research on a new strategy, a new product differentiation. Or it's even an opportunity to develop policies and procedures. So think about what type of thing you can have your employee do that actually contributes directly to the business. So it becomes a win-win. And with that, I think it's a great time to flip into the Q&A. Scott, do you want me to start with the HR questions, or do you want to jump into some of the PPP questions?
Thank you very much, Chana. You could just jump right in. We, Sunita and I have been answering some questions, and we answered, I don't know if you answered any earlier, but we answered 102.
Oh, the pressure.
I know. And there's only 63 left. There you go.
All right, my goodness.
We have 31 minutes. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and start answering some of these live if you'd like. Do you want me to read them or you read them? Or?
I am. So I'm just going to scroll all the way up to the beginning. You're shaming my poor 12 questions I answered initially.
Oh, okay. You answered 12. That means we only answered 90. Okay. 90,
done. So Kelly's asking about, to keep her employees to receive the $600 per month, or excuse me, per week. What's the maximum amount that you can pay someone? This is a really common question that we get, and it is a challenging one to answer because it all depends on the amount of income that employee stated on their initial application to unemployment and how much they are receiving now. So the guidance I've been providing with clients is, have employees report what their new income is, whatever you're paying them and any other employer might be paying them, and submit that to the unemployment department and let the unemployment department make that decision in terms of what the threshold is. And it's almost impossible for you and I to determine that exact threshold because it's unique for every employee and whatever they stated on their original application. All right, moving on. I'm kind of scrolling through here. And there's a question by Emmy, and I hope I'm saying your name right. What scientific proof can I direct our employees to? And hopefully I answered that earlier on when I talked about sources of truth. So again, for me, I always think of like the World Health Organization, Center for Disease Control, and some of those other government entities. I know that sometimes they can be controversial and not all of us agree on the information we get from those bodies, but figure out your sources of truth, especially the ones that might be holding you accountable. And if those are it, then share those with your employees. All right, still moving through. Lots of PPPs, calculating the 8 weeks. Don't leave. So let's see, I'm looking at a question from Sean. Is the annual income threshold of $17,368 or $600 only for PUA, right? So pandemic unemployment assistance, or does it apply to regular unemployment income? Can you tell me where I can find more information about this? So that $17,368 is specific. It is specific to CARES Act and the pandemic unemployment assistance. You can find out about the income thresholds by visiting the EDD page. So the Employment Development Department actually has a booklet called For Your Benefit. And For Your Benefit is that booklet we should be giving employees when they depart employment from us as employers. And then in that guide, there is actually, at the very back pages, you can see a chart that talks about earnings, how much somebody would earn, and then what their weekly benefit would be under the regular unemployment guidelines. So Sean, I know that was a complicated answer, but I also know you know where to find me if you need me. So you can ask that question again. So just moving down through the list again. So Chris is asking, is that 17,000 related to PUA the maximum? No, it is the minimum. It is the minimum amount for eligibility under pandemic unemployment insurance assistance. Let's see. Still moving down. Oh, good question. Roger is asking, Roger, I'm not sure I have an answer for this, but I think it merits asking. Roger's asking, how do you social distance on a bus? Right, so I think some of the transportation agencies are thinking about different ways, which might be skipping seats. But really for us, it's about the same methodologies and process that we would take when we're going out into public, which is wearing our gloves, doing lots of hand washing, using hand sanitizer where we can, using respiratory etiquette, which is that mask, or using your elbow for coughing and sneezing. So it really becomes about protecting ourselves and others by using that etiquette. And hopefully the transit authorities will find different ways to protect us when we're on public transportation. Scott, do you want to take a couple and I'll kind of scroll through here? Scott's giving me the look.
Yes, I can. I can do that. Yeah. So I was trying to figure out how do we push for more EIDL info with our loan number? Who do we specifically contact? You can contact SBA disaster. You can call the number. You can call this number, or it's 800-659-2955, or you can email disaster customer service at sba.gov. See here. Somebody's asking that they have not been able to find thermometers for sale. Any advice? It's a great question. I have no idea.
Scott, I'm going to offer that several companies like Amazon and Costco have business accounts, and many of us utilize just kind of the regular public accounts. And we're finding that through those business accounts with Amazon and Costco, you might be able to get other things like thermometers.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
I'll add on the Office of Disaster Assistance item just for folks that I know a number of folks, so that Office of Disaster Assistance experience of going through the 1-800 number, from speaking with business owners, from speaking with folks that are trying to get status updates on their EIDL applications, it really depends on where your application is in the queue, whether they're able to give any status update at all. So the experience on the 1-800 number sometimes is variable depending on where your application is. The best thing to do is just kind of, or wait, is sort of the instruction we have from our Office of Disaster Assistance, who are currently processing millions of applications.
Thank you, Noah. All right, so disgruntled business owner was declined for triple P and PUA because the small business somehow attached their business to their partner's business and was paid in cash and cannot reflect documentation on receiving payroll. Are there any options for them to receive PPP or PUA? Well, they might have to reapply with the right documentation. That's what I'd recommend, but I'm not sure if Noah would recommend something else, but yeah, that's what I would recommend.
So it was a PPP application, it sounds like?
Yeah, PPP and PUA. Sounds
Yeah.
like they submitted the wrong documentation and it got kicked back.
Yeah, that's, and that's with your lender at that point also, that you need to reapply either with that lender or with a different lender with the correct documentation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think, yeah.
I see I uploaded one, asking, they'd heard that the forgivable PPP timeline got extended from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. That did not happen.
Okay.
So, a lot of people voted that one up. I just wanted to, say that's not the case. That might be one of those items where I mentioned right now there's current debates in Congress about rule fixes and changes in the next stimulus bill and all that. Until something gets signed into law, it doesn't exist really.
Okay. Does anybody know this one? Can a sole proprietor also increase their payout by 25%? Because you know how in triple P it says currently that the most increase that you can give to somebody today is 25% or more of their.
Well,
do that too, or probably not, right? Or you're on mute.
all right. So that kind of falls into that category of we're awaiting that Treasury guidance that can provide those detailed answers, those nuts and bolts answers to how forgiveness is applied for and under what conditions. So the 25% pay increase, even that 25% threshold is broad. That's kind of broad sketched out part of the program. That even that we want to wait until we get those Treasury details to understand better what the restrictions are around it.
Okay. Cool. I asked a question, but it was deleted. It was, can I use PPP money for gas if we are a mobile service? So you can use it for gas, but it will not be forgiven. Gas is not one of the forgivable items in triple P. It's not like a utility expense. Yeah,
the categories of utilities, just to go over what is a utility, are, I just want to pull it up. So eligible utilities include, well, actually, no, include electricity, gas, water, telephone, internet service.
But gas for like,
like
not
propane.
Gas for, propane, right? Or you don't know?
I don't know. I mean, all I know are those, those 5, items. It doesn't go into all the definitions of types of gas.
Okay.
In different parts of the country, they use propane. So I'm assuming that gas and propane is going to be one and the same. And, up in Auburn, places like that, they don't have. They just
right. It's like PG&E, like your gas heating bill is what is implied, but, the actual text just says those 5, so.
Okay. All right. We've answered 126. There's still 78. Whoever's on the phone is doing a really good job entering questions faster than we can answer them. So kudos to all of you. We have 20 minutes left, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can. If your question does not get answered live here, you can call us right here at 833-ASK-SBDC and speak to someone, And if they don't know the answer, they'll get you to either myself or Chana or Sunita, and we'll get the answer for you. Or you can email us. If those of you that speak Spanish and would like to speak to someone else that speaks Spanish, you can email us at espanol@asksbdc.com. We have a great team at the California Hispanic Chamber in Sacramento. They cover the whole region for us, and they are doing all this in Spanish. Everything that we're doing here in English, they're doing in Spanish, and they have experts here for you also at no cost. So yeah, that's all right. Shauna, did you want to go answer some more?
There's a couple of questions in there I think we can answer. So there's a question about recourse if employees refuse to wear a mask. And really, you as the employer can set up the requirements in your place of business. I would say first, let's take a look at maybe the shelter-in-place orders or any other orders that might be predominant in terms of your city or your county or the state. And let's look at those first. If it's a requirement by any of those type of bodies, we want to make sure that staff do adhere to those. If it's not a requirement, then you, again, as a business owner, have the opportunity to set that parameter that this is what needs to happen in your place of business. And then it becomes similar to holding employees accountable, just like you would for any other employment policy or program that you have. And I realize that that's a nuance and it's a little bit of a dance because we're in this unique position of wanting employees to work and wanting them to be present in the workplace. But we do have a responsibility to protect not only their health, but our own and that of your clients and customers. So you have the ability to discipline employees and hold them accountable if they are not following the protocols you've established. All right, kind of scrolling through. I think there was another one in here, Scott. Gosh, I just lost it.
It moves as you.
It does. What you all don't see on the back end or the front end is every time you put in a question, the questions we were looking at all move. It's like a scrolling screen, so we have to dig back through those.
But the upvoted ones all go up to the top. So
Yeah. So hey, Noah. Somebody says, I think what is causing more confusion with gas expenses, there is mention of transportation. What would the transportation be?
yeah, that's an item we don't have clarification on.
Oh.
Whether.
There's a question as well about, where do non-medical high contact employees fall? And I say, take a look at the governor's staged reopening process. I believe that those type of facilities are going to be stage 4 or stage 5 in terms of the reopening and when they can come back online. But that has been outlined in the governor's plan. And if either Scott or Sunita or Noah, if I got that wrong, let me know.
All right, thank you. You got that right. It says, somebody wants to clarify, in order to get the extra $600 PUA, I have to make at least $17,368 in 2019. That's true, okay.
That is true. Yes. Okay. I think, a lot of the questions in here are about these different configurations of employees returning to work and availability for unemployment. And I recognize that we're not giving you a really direct answer, and that's because it really is individualized in terms of how much that employee is making without knowing exact figures. I don't think any of us could probably opine on that, and EDD really is the last authority on it. So I'm strongly encouraging everybody continue to apply for unemployment. When you do resume work, is to put that on your updated online form so that you can get feedback in terms of what that threshold is.
There is one that I've noticed that I've seen in there that we can certainly pick out, which was somebody was saying, I'm wondering how to rehire on the PPP. My retail locations are closed and most of my employees do not have a job to return to. Noah, do you want to give us the official line on that one?
Yes. So the design of the Paycheck Protection Program is to provide salaries and it's called the Paycheck Protection Program. So even though the shelter-in-place policies may still be in effect and you may not be able to open your business, the expectation is that you bring employees back and pay them anyway. So Chana laid out, I think, a lot of great options for ways to bring back employees and still utilize their time in a way that is beneficial towards the business. But if none of those work for your particular business, it is perfectly consistent within the Paycheck Protection Program to pay employees to stay at home right now, even though your business may be closed and not running.
All right, we have 14 minutes left. We've answered 146. We still have 73 left.
I've got a couple.
All right, cool.
All right, so one of those is, where can I find a list of questions to include for an employee health screening? And that comes directly from the Center for Disease Control. They have a great CDC COVID-19 business webpage. And on that, under the symptoms section, there are questions that you can ask. There's even an employee self-check calculator, not for lack of a better term, that you can use. So you can use that self-check, or you can actually take those questions and place them on a piece of paper and kind of create your own self-checklist following the guidance from the CDC. There's only about 7 or 8 symptoms initially, and then there are some ones that are more progressive, but it's really about capturing those 7 to 8 initial symptoms. So you can truly create your own. And then we have a question about the FCRA, so the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. And if I keep my payroll below 50 employees, I'm exempt from all of this, correct? So that's a maybe. So that's the first criteria, right? Is that you have 50 employees or less, that the person taking the leave is taking it for a childcare reason related to COVID-19. And then remember, you as the business owner have to take a look at those additional criteria, either related to financial exposure, minimal operations, or related to the job duties that might be unique to an individual, and make a business decision. So you have to take the ownership on that and decide whether or not your business is exempt and document your decision. So I'm just reading one more. Actually, I think that was more of a statement. So there's a question or statement around, if my employee is over age 70, is that a protected leave case? Can she refuse to return to work and keep unemployment insurance? So we are really highly aware, have some heightened sensitivity to employees that may be in high risk categories, that may be immunosuppressed, and we're really encouraging employers to be flexible where they can. Perhaps those employees can continue to work remote. Maybe they're not in your first wave or your second wave of people that are coming back to the workplace. They might be in your third wave after you've tested a lot of those protocols. So be flexible with them, engage in conversation about what the right workspace or return to work might look like. And if they are not coming back to work, they may still be ineligible for unemployment insurance.
I also wanted to say just really quickly that there are a few people that have multiple questions. And if you have multiple questions, we would really love for you to be able to get with an advisor and have that advisor answer all those questions for you. You can sign up. You can go through the Ask SBDC and sign up there. You can give us a call at our number and we'd be happy to get you signed up too. So please go ahead and call us so we can sign you up. That'll be probably the fastest, easiest way to do that. And our people are waiting for you to call. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. Hey, is workman's comp payments qualified under payroll costs? Do you know that? Is it yes or no?
Yeah, that's a no.
No, okay. No workman's comp included in payroll costs. Okay.
I see a number of questions also about how to handle employees that are earning more on unemployment or who have not returned back to work. And I think Chana might have talked about this a little bit also, but under the PPP program, so long as you have documentation of a refusal to return back to work, that those employees will not be counted against the employer when they go to apply for forgiveness. So you need to make an offer. That offer needs to be essentially what they were earning prior to being furloughed, do the shelter-in-place orders, so same hours, same salary, and if you have that documentation, they'll be backed out of any calculations for forgiveness reduction. And I don't know, Chana, you might have additional perspectives on that or not, but yeah.
Yeah, that was perfect, Noah.
Just
Thank
from
you.
a strategy, HR strategy perspective, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really see the consternation that small businesses are facing around just that tension between the $600 and the PPP funds, and it's a little bit of a disincentive for employees to come back to work. So it is the challenge that we have to try to figure out. How do we incent employees to come back? And that $600 is going to end. It ends at the end of July, around July 25th. So hopefully we can get our employees back before then. And I'm just reading through the chat to see.
It is also okay to hire other employees as well. You don't have to hire the same employees that you had beforehand. So the program is going to revolve around the number of employees, or I think it's FTEs that they may use from the forgiveness portion, but that's the thing that we're waiting on the Treasury guidance to really clarify. But it's not going to be tied to any one specific employee. That is what's clear.
No, that's a great point, because some of the questions we've gotten from clients and a few in the chat are really about, do I have to rehire the exact same person? I said that there were 20 employees on my PPP application, so I understand I might need to hire the same level of FTEs, but they don't have to be that same person. So if there is an individual that you have laid off that you are not necessarily interested in bringing back to your business, there's nothing that says you have to rehire that particular person. Unless you are in a unionized environment and you have a collective bargaining agreement with recall rights, that's a whole separate conversation that we should have offline. But if that is not you, there is no requirement that you have to bring back a certain employee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, PPP really is driven around payroll expenses and the FTE or headcount, not specific work performed or specific people.
Noah, have you had the question posed about people receiving less on their PPP than what they applied for? So maybe they said, I have 20 employees and I'm applying for 100,000, but they actually received like 60,000, and they have some uncertainty around what to do with that 20 employee count.
So I guess the way that the program is structured, the 2.5 times average payroll cost calculation is a maximum under the Paycheck Protection Program. So a lender can lend underneath, they can choose to lend less. That's a really good question about how that impacts the FTE count that they may need to meet for forgiveness provisions. And I don't have an answer for that, aside from saying that we do know that the 75%, 25%, or the forgiveness under the Paycheck Protection Program isn't going to be black and white. It's not going to be either 100% forgiveness or 0% forgiveness. There will be a mechanism for proportional forgiveness as part of the rules that get issued by Treasury. What that calculation is, how exactly it works, we have to wait for those rules to come out.
I've started seeing a whole bunch of questions going into chat. Please don't put them in chat because the questions are being triaged out of the Q&A space. So if you put it in chat, it's not going to get answered. Put it in Q&A, and also we have a process whereby anything that's not answered in the within the session gets handled after the session, but only from the Q&A, not from the chat.
There's a question I think Kevin and I might, or excuse me, Noah and I might be able to respond to. And that, Noah, is around an employer paying employees a bonus. And so the eligibility to have bonuses actually covered under the PPP. So do you want to kind of address that, Noah, and I can jump in after you?
Whether bonuses can be issued.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think so. Part of that is whether it's documented as like a regular expense that that was being paid out in the past. And I just want to pull it up here, make sure that So I think that really is the answer. It's whether that you've seen it. Those bonuses be paid out in the past, and whether that's in line with what people may have earned in prior years.
Perfect. I don't need to add a single thing to that. No, that was spot on.
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So we have 4 minutes. We've answered 169 questions. We still have 63. Again, if you want a quick answer, you should call us. If you want a little bit of a longer answer, you can email us. But I would call if I were you. We have live people ready to talk to you. If they can't answer the phone, they will, or if they can't answer your question, they will get you to one of our advisors that can help you out. So we have 4 minutes. All right.
I've got another one.
Okay.
So my jurisdiction requires mass. Can I discipline for refusal, including docking wages? So if I had a big buzzer right now, it'd be like, no, do not dock wages, right? We have to pay people for all timed work, particularly if they are non-exempt or paid by the hour. So if someone is paid by the hour, we pay them for every hour that they work. If somebody is salaried, we pay them for full work weeks. So you can discipline your staff, meaning you can write them up, you can coach them, you can even end employment, but please do not dock wages for failure to follow a policy. All right, what's our time count, Scott? What do we got, 5 minutes?
3.
3. I'm doing the mad dash. If Noah or Sunita or anybody sees anything in the Q&A.
So yeah, there was one question about about the EIDL and the PPP overlap and backing that out of backing how much you receive under the EIDL advance from your PPP loan, and someone said, well, when I applied for my PPP, they didn't back out my advance at that time, and the answer is that so when you have to back out your EIDL advance under the PPP forgiveness, that will be when you go to apply for forgiveness, not when you're applying at the front end. So when you go back to your lender and ask for forgiveness, they should at that point ask how much of the advance did you receive from the EIDL if you received an EIDL.
What's the partial benefit credit in California? Employees who were part-time before will ask me this when returning to work. What's the partial benefit credit in California?
I'm assuming that means partial unemployment, or basically it's the combination of having reduced hours and being eligible for partial unemployment. And to that, it is again unique to how much money each individual employee made. And if you're curious and want to take a look at the chart, then that would be the EDD, Employment Development Department, for your benefit guide, which has a lengthy chart in the back where you can actually do the equation between how much someone made or how much you made and what your weekly benefit would be. So take a look at that if you're really curious.
Awesome. And then that'll wrap us up for today. Again, thank you very much for Chana for being here and presenting again, and for answering all the great questions. Thank you very much, Chana, as our guest speaker today. And then thank you very much, Noah Brode, for being on from SBA. We appreciate the live support. Thanks to Sunita Maharaj for helping us with the questions. And then thanks to Alan for helping us put this webinar together today. We did send out a survey this morning to find out what you want to know as a business owner that we are not bringing to you. We were talking about loans. We were talking about e-commerce a little bit earlier this week. We talked about HR and some issues within that through thanks to Chana. So please let us know what you want to know, whether it be anything that you could think of that we're not bringing to the table, whether it be landlord negotiations, bankruptcy, how to reinvent yourself, how to reopen, all that great stuff, and then how to access other capital that you're not aware of. We're here for you, again, at no cost. You can email us, you can call us, and you can call SBA and email them. So thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. We hope you all have a great weekend, And then we'll be back here again on Monday at 10:30. So thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.